I want to bring in Duane Bratt for more on this. He's a professor of political science at Mount Royal University, and he's joining us from Calgary. Duane, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. So there's this caucus meeting going on right now in the UCP caucus in Alberta. What do you think could come out of that caucus meeting?
I think there could very well be a motion of non-confidence on the premier. There are factions within the UCP caucus. There's a faction that believe that the premier broke promises by bringing in a vaccine mandate and bringing in a vaccine passport. And then there's another faction that believes that the government acted way too late and should have responded a month ago to the surge in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths due to COVID. So these are at complete opposite ends. But what they do agree on now is that Premier Kenney needs to go. He was asked about this in a press conference yesterday when he was announcing a new health minister to deal with COVID. He said he has the full confidence of cabinet, caucus, and the party. And almost immediately there were people, anonymous sources, but some on the record from constituency association presidents, party executives, a former cabinet minister, that is serving as a backbencher, publicly calling on the premier to resign.
So, Duane, can you tell us about the mechanics of about how all of this would work? I don't know whether there's any kind of thing formal, maybe it's informal, but is it kind of just like, go ahead.
If Kenney wants to leave, he can, right? And he would simply resign. They would choose a new leader that would become a new premier, similar to when Alison Redford stepped down in 2014. Dave Hancock became a premier. I wouldn't call him interim premier because you're either premier or you're not. He was leader of the party. Then they had a leadership convention that chose Jim Prentice. That would be the same path if Kenney were to step down. If, on the other hand, he doesn't want to go, it becomes much tougher to force him out. And there's a lot of tools at his disposal that he can do. So let's say they do have an emergency leadership review in November at the AGM of the party. Okay, then we spend time campaigning for that review. Let's say Kenney loses that review. Then they have a leadership race. Jason Kenney can still run in that leadership race. That might take another couple months or a year to go through. So that's one set of scenarios. Another set of scenarios is maybe the caucus decides they will have a non-confidence motion in the legislature and then tell the lieutenant governor that they've got a replacement. Maybe that happens. Maybe they say, no, sorry, you're going to have to call an election. Maybe Premier Kenney calls to prorogue the legislature like Doug Ford did. Like there's a lot of, my basic point is if Kenney voluntarily leaves, things are simple. If he wants to go kicking and screaming and fighting, he's got a lot of tools at his disposal, and he still has some loyalists that he can prevent it or try to prevent it.
So what's your hunch in terms of you follow Jason Kenney? Is he going to get an earful today and say that's it?
Everything I know about Jason Kenney and his character is he would never voluntarily resign. This is a fighter. He has huge confidence in himself, as any leader, any successful politician does. He doesn't want to be portrayed as another Alison Redford who was forced to resign or another Ed Stelmach. On the other hand, internal UCP polling is showing that Jason Kenney has 9% approval rating in the province of Alberta.
Nine
single digits, 9 out of 100. And there is worries that not only will he could damage the party long term. Interestingly, they're having an emergency meeting about the political fortunes of the party, not the fact that 29 people died yesterday of COVID.
So, I mean, can you be the premier of a province and have, we don't know what's happening inside this caucus meeting, but boy, I'm sure you'd love to be
I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, I'd love to, and not to minimize the COVID situation. I mean, it's arguably all related, the COVID-19 situation, to what's happening politically, because I say it over and over again, but it's important, I think, to highlight is that political decisions are made when it comes to dealing with this public health emergency. That is the way it has been from the beginning.
So when Premier Kenney spoke up last Wednesday and introduced the vaccine passports, the vaccine mandates through a very complicated, and we've had this discussion before, Andrew, the restriction exemption program that people are still not quite sure about. That was a political compromise between the two factions, the two wings of his party. He tried, bear in mind, these were two separate parties, the Progressive Conservative Party and the Wild Rose Party. They were brought together largely through the efforts of Jason Kenney, but we're seeing the splintering of that occurring now, whether that's a rural-urban split, whether that's an ideological split. So yes, as big and nasty as this health crisis is that have people in hospitals, people who have died, the tragedy on the economy of businesses closing and the uncertainty around businesses, it's all wrapped up in a political crisis as well.
And so now you've also got the Premier asking, or the government asking for federal help. How, in terms of the timing of that
that is again a remarkable thing. It's not that they asked the feds for help. They should have done that. The fact that the letter came out the day after the federal election shows that it was politically motivated. And the minister who sent it, Rick McIver, said, well, there was an election going on. We didn't know who the minister was. Well, ministers don't disappear during an election. Bill Blair was the minister. Still is the minister until there's a cabinet shuffle. They were playing partisan political games and people were dying in the province.
What do you think will come out of this caucus meeting? It's one thing to say that Premier Jason Kenney wants to stay and is going to hold on, but given what you know about the caucus and some of the things you were saying, do you suspect that this will become a very public, ugly fight and push to get him out, and then politically he just can't control caucus members that are speaking out, or does he sideline them? I mean, how do you see this playing out?
That's the million-dollar question. If he was to walk out of this room and say, I have the full confidence of the caucus, and then you've got a whole bunch of other people going on the record saying, actually, no, you don't, I wouldn't be surprised. If he came out of the caucus and announced that he was resigning effective tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised either. Like, that's how chaotic the situation is. If it's the Jason Kenney, the self-confident political lifer, he is going to fight. But there's also a Jason Kenney that acknowledges reality and knows that that staying and fighting, he is not going to win. It's a question of stepping down today or a month from now or 6 months from now. It's going to happen. But in the process, he is going to take his party and destroy it, destroy his own creation, not for a couple months, not for an election, but for a decade or more.
And then, Duane, can we talk about this political crisis and this public health emergency all happening at once, as you say, intertwined? I mean, how damaging is that in terms of literally people's lives are at stake and people are dying?
Absolutely. Decisions are being made not on the basis of what would be best for the public health of Albertans. We knew this early August, definitely mid-August. I think he didn't want to make Wednesday's announcement until after the federal election, but the situation was so dire. They are canceling surgeries to deal with COVID. They are delaying medical procedures for little kids. The Children's Hospital has had resources deployed to other hospitals to deal with COVID. They're having to rely on other provinces sending doctors and nurses and accepting patients. It is a horrible situation. It should have been acted on at least a month ago, and instead they were playing political games because Jason Kenney promised open for summer, open forever.
Duane, I think you are angry. Do you think that you are channeling the anger of millions of Albertans? I mean, you are really...
I'm actually controlling my anger as best I can, Andrew. But I had someone tell me, and it's resonated, we are having a humbled bus crash in this province every single day. And yesterday, 29 people died, so it was 2 bus crashes. Our system is overwhelmed, and we're having an emergency caucus meeting to debate the future of the United Conservative Party and debate the future of Jason Kenney. And as a political scientist, I get that. I understand politics, but I'm a human being.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're a human being, and lives are at stake. Duane, I appreciate you taking the time to talk during what are obviously very difficult times for your province, and I think all Canadians are concerned about what we're seeing. Duane, thank you. That is Duane Bratt, a political science professor at Mount Royal University, joining us from Calgary.